Emma had always been the kind of person who believed in kindness, hard work, and staying humble. She wasn't someone who sought attention or craved the spotlight. Instead, she preferred to stay in the background, quietly doing her job and helping others whenever she could. Whether it was assisting a coworker with a challenging project or simply offering a listening ear during tough times, Emma was known as the go-to person for support in her office. Her colleagues often described her as dependable, thoughtful, and genuinely caring. But despite all her good qualities, life had a way of testing even the strongest people, and Emma was no exception. Her journey to this point hadn't been easy. A few years ago, she had started at the company as an entry-level employee, working long hours and putting in extra effort to prove herself. Her dedication paid off, and over time she climbed the ranks, earning respect from her peers and superiors alike. However, not everyone appreciated her success. One person in particular harbored resentment toward Emma, her former best friend Sarah. Sarah and Emma had once been inseparable. They met during their first week at the company and quickly bonded over shared lunches, coffee breaks, and late-night brainstorming sessions. For months, they were each other's biggest cheerleaders, celebrating every milestone together and supporting one another through setbacks. But things changed when jealousy crept into their relationship. It began subtly. A snide comment here, a dismissive remark there, but soon escalated into something much more toxic. The breaking point came when Sarah accused Emma of taking credit for an idea that she claimed was hers. In reality, Emma had developed the concept independently, but Sarah refused to believe her. The disagreement led to a heated argument, and their friendship ended abruptly. Since then, Sarah had made it her mission to undermine Emma at every turn. She spread rumors about her, excluded her from important meetings, and went out of her way to make her feel inferior. Despite Sarah's behavior, Emma chose not to retaliate. She believed that staying professional and focusing on her work was the best way to handle the situation. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Emma decided to take a rare break from her usual routine. She rarely indulged in stepping away from her desk during lunchtime, but today felt different. The sun was shining brightly outside, and the crisp autumn air carried a refreshing coolness that invited her to step outdoors. With a sigh of relief, she grabbed her wallet and headed to a cozy cafe just a block away from the office. As she entered the cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods enveloped her, instantly lifting her spirits. She ordered a simple salad and found a quiet spot by the window to sit. From her vantage point, she could watch the bustling street outside while enjoying some much-needed solitude. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. Little did she know, this peaceful moment wouldn't last long. Just as Emma settled into her seat and began unpacking her meal, the door to the cafe swung open. In walked Sarah, accompanied by two of their mutual colleagues. At first, Emma didn't think anything of it. She assumed they were simply grabbing a quick bite before heading back to the office. Hoping to avoid any awkward encounters, she kept her head down and focused on her food. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. Sarah spotted Emma almost immediately. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the room, zeroing in on the lone figure seated by the window. A sly smile spread across her face as she nudged her companions and whispered something under her breath. Without hesitation, she marched over to Emma's table, dragging a chair with her. Placing it directly across from Emma, she plopped down, without invitation, her two friends following suit. The atmosphere shifted instantly, growing tense and uncomfortable. "Well, well," Sarah drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who's dining solo again. Still haven't found anyone better than me?" Her words hung in the air like a challenge, daring Emma to respond. The two colleagues seated beside her exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. They knew Sarah's reputation for being difficult and neither wanted to get caught in the crossfire. Emma froze, her fork hovering midair. She hadn't expected this confrontation, especially not in such a public setting. For a brief moment she considered standing up and leaving, but pride rooted her to her seat. Taking a deep breath, she forced a polite smile and replied, "Hi, Sarah. I'm just here to enjoy my lunch." But Sarah wasn't interested in pleasantries. Leaning forward, she launched into a barrage of insults, each word carefully calculated to cut deeper than the last. She mocked Emma's choice of food, criticized her wardrobe, and even brought up past grievances that Emma thought were long forgotten. Every comment was delivered with a smirk, as if Sarah took pleasure in seeing Emma squirm. The cafe grew, quieter as nearby patrons began to eavesdrop, curious about the unfolding drama. Despite the mounting humiliation, Emma tried to maintain her composure. She reminded herself that reacting emotionally would only give Sarah the satisfaction she clearly craved. Yet, as the verbal assault continued, it became harder and harder to hold back tears. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, Sarah reached across the table and grabbed Emma's untouched salad. Holding it up for everyone to see, she sneered, "Oh, what is this? Rabbit food? No wonder no one wants to eat with you." With a dramatic flourish, she dumped the contents onto the floor, leaving Emma red-faced and speechless as the cafe fell silent. The cafe, once filled with the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of cutlery against plates, had fallen eerily silent. Every eye in the room was now fixed on Emma's table, where Sarah's cruel act had left a trail of embarrassment and disbelief. The salad lay scattered across the floor, its greens and vegetables splayed out like an unwelcome centerpiece. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Emma sat frozen in her chair, her face burning with shame as she stared at the mess before her. Her mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. How could someone she once called a friend stoop so low, and why did it have to happen in front of complete strangers? Sarah, however, appeared unfazed by the scene she had created. If anything, she looked triumphant, as though she had just won some sort of twisted victory. With a smug grin plastered across her face, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms confidently. "Well," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Aren't you going to clean that up, or are you waiting for someone else to do it for you?" Emma clenched her fists under the table, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream, to cry, to retaliate, anything to release the storm of emotions brewing inside her. But instead, she forced herself to take slow, steady breaths. Reacting would only give Sarah more ammunition, and Emma knew that. Still, the weight of the humiliation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She could feel the eyes of the cafe patrons boring into her, their expressions ranging from pity to discomfort. Some whispered behind their hands, while others simply shook their heads in disapproval. Her two colleagues, who had followed Sarah to the table, shifted awkwardly in their seats. They exchanged hesitant glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but unwilling to intervene. One of them cleared his throat nervously, attempting to lighten the mood. Maybe we should get back to work soon," he suggested half-heartedly, avoiding direct eye contact with either woman. But Sarah ignored him, too consumed by her own sense of superiority to care about anyone else's feelings. "What's the matter, Emma?" Sarah continued, her tone dripping with mockery. "Cat got your tongue? Or are you finally realizing how pathetic you really are?" She let out a sharp laugh, prompting her friends to chuckle uneasily along with her. It was clear they didn't find the situation funny. They were merely playing along to avoid becoming targets themselves. Emma's heart pounded in her ears as she struggled to maintain her composure. She reminded herself that Sarah thrived on chaos, feeding off the reactions of those around her. Giving her the satisfaction of seeing tears or anger would only fuel her cruelty further. Instead, Emma focused on the details of the cafe, the warm glow of the overhead lights, the faint scent of freshly baked bread wafting through the air, the gentle rustling of leaves outside the window. These small distractions helped anchor her, keeping her grounded in the present moment rather than spiraling into despair. But Sarah wasn't done yet. Emboldened by the lack of resistance, she leaned forward again, resting her elbows on the table. "You know, I've been meaning to tell you something," she began, her voice taking on a falsely sweet tone. "It's impressive how you manage to show up every day pretending like you actually belong here. But let's be honest, you're nothing special. No one respects you, no one likes you, and frankly, no one even notices when you're gone." Each word felt like a dagger piercing Emma's soul. She had always prided herself on being resilient, on brushing off negativity and focusing on the positives in life. But this was different. This wasn't just criticism. It was calculated cruelty designed to strip away her confidence and leave her feeling worthless. And worst of all, it was happening in front of an audience. Strangers who didn't know her, who couldn't possibly understand the years of friendship she and Sarah had shared, or the betrayal she had endured when that friendship crumbled. As Sarah spoke, Emma noticed a few patrons shaking their heads in disgust. An elderly couple sitting nearby exchanged sympathetic looks, their faces etched with concern. A young barista behind the counter paused mid-task, her expression shifting from curiosity to outright discomfort. Even the cafe owner emerged from the kitchen, leaning against the doorway with folded arms as if debating whether to step in. Yet no one said a word. No one dared to challenge Sarah, leaving Emma to face the onslaught alone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah stood up, brushing imaginary crumbs from her lap. "Well, I think we've overstayed our welcome," she announced dramatically, gesturing for her colleagues to follow her. Turning back to Emma, she added with a smirk, "Enjoy the rest of your lunch. Oh, wait, you can't." With that, she strode toward the exit, her entourage trailing behind her like obedient shadows. Emma watched them go, her body trembling with a mix of anger, sadness, and exhaustion. As the door swung shut behind them, the cafe erupted into murmurs. Some customers resumed their conversations, while others openly discussed what they had just witnessed. A few kind souls approached Emma's table, offering words of encouragement or asking if she needed help. One woman even handed her a napkin, saying softly, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. You didn't deserve that." Despite their kindness, Emma felt utterly drained. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, to escape the suffocating weight of the moment. Gathering her belongings, she prepared to leave, her appetite completely gone. But as she stood up, she caught sight of something, or rather, someone, out of the corner of her eye. Sitting at a corner table near the back of the cafe was a man she recognized immediately, Daniel Carter, the CEO of her company. He had been watching the entire exchange unfold, his expression unreadable but undeniably intense. For a split second, their eyes met. Emma quickly looked away, unsure of what to make of his presence. Had he heard everything? Was he judging her, silently analyzing how she had handled the situation? Or worse, did he agree with Sarah's harsh words? The thought sent a fresh wave of anxiety coursing through her veins. Little did she know, Daniel's reaction would change everything. Not just for her, but for Sarah as well. Emma's heart raced as she noticed Daniel Carter sitting quietly at the corner table. His presence felt both comforting and intimidating all at once. She had only ever seen him in meetings or during company-wide presentations, where he exuded an aura of authority and professionalism. He was the kind of leader who commanded respect without needing to raise his voice. Yet here he was, witnessing one of the most humiliating moments of her life. The thought made her stomach churn with unease. As Sarah and her colleagues exited the cafe, their laughter trailing behind them like a dark cloud, Emma hesitated. Should she leave too? Or should she stay and face whatever might come next? Her instincts told her to bolt out the door and put as much distance as possible between herself and this disastrous scene. But something about Daniel's steady gaze rooted her to the spot. It wasn't judgmental or cold, it was thoughtful, almost protective. Against her better judgment, she remained seated, clutching her bag tightly in her lap. Daniel didn't move immediately. Instead, he took a moment to observe the aftermath of the confrontation. His sharp eyes scanned the scattered salad on the floor, the empty chairs around Emma's table, and the lingering tension in the air. Then, with deliberate calmness, he rose from his seat and approached her table. Every step he took seemed to carry weight, commanding attention from everyone in the cafe. Conversations hushed again, and all eyes turned to watch him. "Miss Harper," he began, his deep voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "May I have a word?" Emma blinked, startled by his sudden address. For a brief second, she wondered if she had misheard him. After all, why would the CEO of her company take the time to speak to her after such an incident? Swallowing hard, she nodded nervously. Of course, Mr. Carter, she replied, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to sound composed. Instead of continuing the conversation right there, Daniel gestured toward his table. Would you mind joining me for a moment? He asked politely, though there was an underlying firmness to his tone that left little room for refusal. Emma hesitated, unsure of what to expect. Was this some sort of test? A reprimand disguised as concern? Or perhaps he simply wanted to offer words of encouragement? Whatever the reason, she knew she couldn't decline, not without risking further awkwardness. Gathering her courage, Emma stood up and followed him to the corner table. As they sat down across from each other, Daniel folded his hands neatly on the surface and studied her for a moment. His expression was unreadable, but his piercing gaze suggested that he was carefully considering his next words. Finally, he spoke. I must admit I overheard part of your interaction with Miss Thompson, he said, referring to Sarah by her last name. His choice of words was measured, yet there was no mistaking the disapproval in his tone. And I feel compelled to say something. Emma's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She hated being the center of attention under normal circumstances, let alone in front of someone as influential as Daniel. Lowering her eyes, she mumbled, I'm sorry you had to see that, sir. It won't happen again. To her surprise, Daniel shook his head firmly. Don't apologize, he said, his voice carrying a note of authority. You did nothing wrong. What Ms. Thompson did, and I use the term did loosely, was unprofessional, disrespectful, and frankly unacceptable. There's no excuse for treating another person that way, especially within the confines of our workplace culture. Emma looked up, stunned by his words. Never in her wildest dreams had she expected anyone, let alone the CEO, to defend her so passionately. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined not to cry in front of him. Thank you, Mr. Carter, she managed to say softly. That means a lot. Daniel nodded, his expression softening slightly. Let me be clear. Behavior like that has no place in this company, or anywhere else for that matter. I pride myself on fostering an environment where employees feel valued and respected. Clearly, there's work to be done in ensuring that standard is upheld. He paused, leaning back in his chair as if contemplating his next move. Tell me, Miss Harper, how long has this been going on between you and Ms. Thompson? The question caught Emma off guard. She hadn't anticipated being asked to recount the details of her strained relationship with Sarah, especially not to someone in Daniel's position. Hesitating for a moment, she chose her words carefully. It started a few months ago, sir. We used to be close friends, but things changed. I don't know exactly when or why, but she began acting differently toward me. At first, it was small comments or passive-aggressive remarks. Lately, though, it's escalated into situations like this. Daniel listened intently, his brow furrowing, as she spoke. When she finished, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head in disbelief. This isn't just a personal conflict, he said gravely. This is bullying. Plain and simple. And it needs to stop, not just for your sake, but for the sake of maintaining a healthy workplace dynamic. His words gave Emma a sense of validation she hadn't realized she needed. For so long, she had tried to brush off Sarah's behavior, convincing herself that it wasn't worth making a fuss over. But hearing Daniel call it what it truly was, bullying, made her realize just how damaging the situation had become. I appreciate your understanding, Mr. Carter, Emma said sincerely. But I don't want to cause any trouble. I've always tried to handle these kinds of issues privately. Daniel raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by her reluctance to escalate the matter. Sometimes handling things privately isn't enough, he countered gently. There comes a point where speaking up becomes necessary, not just for yourself but for others who may find themselves in similar situations. Your silence could inadvertently enable bad behavior to continue unchecked. Emma nodded slowly, absorbing his advice. She hadn't considered the broader implications of staying quiet. Perhaps Daniel was right. Maybe addressing the issue directly was the only way to bring about real change. Before she could respond further, Daniel added, "Rest assured I'll be looking into this personally. Actions will be taken to ensure that incidents like this are not repeated. In the meantime, please know that you have my full support. If there's anything you need, whether it's mediation, additional resources, or simply someone to talk to, you can come to me anytime." Touched by his sincerity, Emma felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. For the first time since entering the cafe, she allowed herself to relax, even if just a little. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she said again, her voice steadier this time. "I really appreciate it." With that, Daniel stood up, signaling the end of their conversation. "Take care of yourself, Miss Harper," he said warmly before turning to leave. As he walked away, Emma watched him go, marveling at the unexpected turn of events. What had started as a humiliating encounter had transformed into something else entirely. A chance for justice, redemption, and perhaps even growth. Unbeknownst to Emma, Daniel wasted no time addressing the issue. Later that afternoon, he called an emergency meeting with HR and senior management, detailing everything he had witnessed at the cafe. By the end of the day, Sarah's actions had been formally documented, and steps were already being taken to hold her accountable. Little did Sarah know, her cruel behavior had finally caught up with her, and thanks to Daniel's intervention, Emma would never have to endure such treatment again. The rest of Emma's day passed in a blur. After her conversation with Daniel Carter at the cafe, she returned to the office feeling a mix of emotions: gratitude for his support, apprehension about what might happen next, and lingering embarrassment from the earlier scene. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to the events of the afternoon. What would Daniel do? Would Sarah face consequences for her actions? And how would this affect their already strained professional relationship? Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Emma, Daniel wasted no time taking action. As soon as he left the cafe, he made a phone call to Human Resources, HR, requesting an urgent meeting with senior management. His tone was calm but firm, leaving no room for negotiation or delay. By mid-afternoon, a small group had gathered in one of the company's private conference rooms. Daniel, 2 HR representatives, and a member of the executive leadership team. The agenda was clear: to address Sarah's behavior and ensure it never happened again. Daniel began the meeting by recounting everything he had witnessed at the cafe. He described Sarah's cruel remarks, her deliberate attempt to humiliate Emma in front of strangers, and the overall toxic atmosphere she had created. His account was detailed and unflinching, painting a vivid picture of just how far Sarah had crossed the line. "This isn't just a personal conflict," he emphasized. "It's bullying, plain and simple. And if we allow it to continue unchecked, it sets a dangerous precedent for our workplace culture." The HR representatives listened intently, jotting down notes as Daniel spoke. They exchanged concerned glances, clearly aware of the gravity of the situation. While Sarah's reputation for being difficult was well known within the company, this level of public misconduct was unprecedented. One of the HR reps nodded thoughtfully and said, "We've received informal complaints about Ms. Thompson before, but nothing like this. Clearly, we need to take immediate steps to address the issue." After discussing the details of the incident, the group agreed on a plan of action. First, they decided to formally document Sarah's behavior, using Daniel's testimony as evidence. Second, they would hold a disciplinary meeting with Sarah later that week, during which she would be issued a formal warning. Any repeat offenses would result in further consequences, including potential termination. Finally, they resolved to implement additional training sessions for all employees, focusing on workplace respect and professionalism. By the end of the meeting, Daniel felt confident that progress was being made, but he wasn't done yet. Before leaving the conference room, he turned to the HR representatives and added, "I also want to personally check in with Ms. Harper. This kind of experience can leave lasting scars, and I want to make sure she has the resources and support she needs to move forward." With that, the meeting adjourned, and plans were set into motion. Later that evening, Emma received an email from Daniel. It was brief but thoughtful, thanking her once again for her resilience and assuring her that appropriate measures were being taken to address the situation. He also invited her to meet with him privately the following morning to discuss any concerns she might have. Reading the message, Emma couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. For so long, she had felt powerless against Sarah's relentless negativity. Now, for the first time, she saw a path toward resolution, and possibly even peace. The next morning, Emma arrived at Daniel's office promptly at 9 a.m., as requested. She knocked lightly on the door, half expecting him to be busy or distracted. Instead, he greeted her warmly, offering her a seat and a cup of coffee. The gesture was simple but meaningful, putting her at ease almost immediately. "Thank you for coming," Daniel began, his tone friendly yet professional. "I wanted to touch base with you directly and see how you're doing after yesterday's incident." Emma hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to share. "To be honest, sir, I'm still processing everything," she admitted. "It's not easy to be put in that kind of situation, especially in front of so many people. But I really appreciate your support. It means more than I can say." Daniel nodded sympathetically. "You handled yourself with remarkable grace under incredibly difficult circumstances," he said. "That takes strength, and I want you to know that it hasn't gone unnoticed. You're a valuable member of this team, and incidents like the one yesterday should never undermine your confidence or contributions." His words brought tears to Emma's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. No one had ever spoken to her with such genuine admiration and respect, not even during her most successful moments at work. For years, she had poured her energy into excelling professionally, often sacrificing personal recognition in the process. Hearing Daniel acknowledge her worth validated every late night, every early morning, and every challenge she had overcome. Encouraged by her response, Daniel continued, "I also want to assure you that steps are being taken to ensure this doesn't happen again. Ms. Thompson will be held accountable for her actions, and will be implementing additional measures to promote a healthier workplace environment. If there's anything specific you'd like us to address, please don't hesitate to let me know." Emma nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. Honestly, knowing that something is being done makes a huge difference. I just hope this leads to positive changes, not just for me, but for everyone." Daniel smiled, clearly pleased with her perspective. "That's exactly the mindset we need around here. Speaking of which, I'd like to offer you an opportunity to take on a new project, one that aligns closely with your strengths and interests. It's a chance to showcase your talents while contributing to some exciting initiatives we're working on. Would you be open to discussing it further?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had always dreamed of being entrusted with high-impact projects, but self-doubt often held her back from pursuing them. Now, sitting across from Daniel, she realized that maybe she deserved this opportunity after all. "Absolutely," she replied, her voice filled with determination. "I'd love to learn more." Over the next hour, Daniel outlined the details of the project, a cross-departmental initiative aimed at improving client engagement strategies. He explained that Emma's analytical skills, creativity, and ability to collaborate effectively made her the ideal candidate to lead the effort. As they discussed timelines, goals, and potential challenges, Emma felt a surge of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just a project. It was a chance to prove herself, to grow professionally, and to rebuild her confidence after months of doubt and humiliation. When the meeting finally came to an end, Emma left Daniel's office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to imagine a future free from fear and uncertainty. Sarah's actions had been devastating, but they had also inadvertently opened the door to something far greater, a newfound sense of purpose and validation. And thanks to Daniel's intervention, Emma knew she wouldn't have to face the aftermath alone. As she returned to her desk, she couldn't help but smile. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to take it on. Little did she know the changes sparked by that fateful lunch would ripple through the company in ways she could never have anticipated, and Sarah's fate was only beginning to unfold. The days following Emma's meeting with Daniel Carter brought a whirlwind of changes. both subtle and significant. Word spread quickly through the office about Sarah's behavior at the cafe and the subsequent disciplinary actions being taken against her. While details were kept confidential to protect everyone involved, it was impossible to ignore the shift in dynamics. Whispers filled the hallways, and colleagues who had once avoided Emma now greeted her warmly, as if seeing her in a new light. For years she had been quietly admired for her hard work and kindness, but now people seemed genuinely eager to support her. Sarah, on the other hand, found herself increasingly isolated. The disciplinary meeting with HR had gone exactly as Daniel predicted. She received a formal warning which included mandatory sensitivity training and close monitoring of her conduct moving forward. Any further incidents would result in immediate termination. To make matters worse, her reputation took a hit among her peers. Once known for her sharp wit and commanding presence, she was now viewed as someone who crossed lines and created unnecessary drama. Colleagues began distancing themselves from her, unwilling to risk becoming collateral damage in her ongoing feud with Emma. For Emma, this newfound attention and respect was both empowering and overwhelming. She had never sought recognition or validation, preferring to let her work speak for itself. But now, with Daniel championing her talents and offering her leadership opportunities, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The project he assigned her, a cross-departmental initiative aimed at improving client engagement strategies, quickly became her top priority. It challenged her in ways she hadn't anticipated, pushing her out of her comfort zone and forcing her to collaborate with teams she rarely interacted with before. At first, navigating these unfamiliar waters was daunting. Emma spent countless hours researching best practices, brainstorming innovative ideas, and coordinating meetings with key stakeholders. There were moments when self-doubt crept in, reminding her of all the times Sarah had tried to undermine her confidence. But each time those thoughts surfaced, Emma reminded herself of Daniel's faith in her abilities and her own determination to succeed. Slowly but surely, she began to see progress. Her ideas gained traction, earning praise not only from her teammates but also from senior management. One particularly memorable moment came during a presentation to the executive board. Standing at the front of the conference room, Emma outlined her team's proposed strategy for enhancing client relationships. As she spoke, she noticed Daniel nodding approvingly, his expression one of quiet pride. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Not just polite clapping, but genuine enthusiasm. Several executives commended her for her creativity, thoroughness, and ability to bring diverse perspectives together. For Emma, it was a turning point, a moment when she realized that she truly belonged in this role and that her contributions mattered. Meanwhile, Sarah's situation continued to deteriorate. Despite her initial defiance, the weight of the formal warning began to wear on her. Sensitivity training proved to be a humbling experience, forcing her to confront behaviors she had long dismissed as harmless teasing. Her attempts to downplay the incident at the cafe fell flat, especially when confronted with first-hand accounts from witnesses. Even her closest allies in the office grew wary of associating with her, fearing they might become targets of her bitterness. It wasn't long before Sarah decided that staying at the company was no longer worth the humiliation. Within weeks of the disciplinary meeting, she submitted her resignation letter citing personal reasons for her departure. While no one explicitly linked her decision to the cafe incident, rumors circulated nonetheless. Some speculated that she couldn't handle the scrutiny, while others believed she simply didn't want to face the consequences of her actions. Regardless of the reason, her exit marked the end of an era and the beginning of a brighter chapter for Emma. With Sarah gone, the toxic cloud that had loomed over the office began to lift. Morale improved and employees started working together more harmoniously. Emma noticed a shift in how people approached collaboration. There was less fear of judgment and more openness to sharing ideas. She credited much of this change to Daniel's leadership. By addressing Sarah's behavior head-on and prioritizing workplace culture, he had set a powerful example for everyone to follow. As months passed, Emma flourished in her new role. Under Daniel's mentorship, she honed her leadership skills, learning how to navigate challenges with grace and resilience. Her success on the client engagement project earned her promotions and accolades, solidifying her status as one of the company's rising stars. More importantly, she rediscovered her confidence, shedding the insecurities that Sarah's bullying had instilled in her. Looking back on the events that led to this transformation, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. What had started as one of the most humiliating experiences of her life had ultimately become a catalyst for growth and redemption. Without Sarah's cruelty, she might never have caught Daniel's attention or been given the opportunity to prove herself in such a meaningful way. And while she wouldn't wish that kind of pain on anyone, she recognized that it had shaped her into a stronger, wiser version of herself. In the end, justice and karma had prevailed. Sarah's actions had backfired spectacularly, costing her not only her job but also her credibility. Meanwhile, Emma emerged victorious, not because she sought revenge but because she chose to rise above the negativity. She focused on her strengths, leaned on supportive mentors like Daniel, and refused to let bitterness consume her. The final piece of closure came during the company's annual awards ceremony. Emma was honored with the Employee of the Year award, an accolade reserved for individuals who demonstrated exceptional dedication, innovation, and teamwork. As she accepted the trophy, tears welled up in her eyes. She thanked her colleagues, her family, and especially Daniel, whose belief in her had changed the trajectory of her career. "I never imagined I'd stand here today," she said, addressing the audience. "There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was strong enough to keep going. But what I've learned is that sometimes the hardest challenges lead to the greatest opportunities. So thank you for believing in me, for supporting me, and for reminding me that kindness and hard work always win in the end." Her speech received a standing ovation, leaving many in the crowd visibly moved. Among them was Daniel, who watched, with a proud smile, knowing that he had played a part in helping Emma reclaim her power. As the evening drew to a close, Emma reflected on how far she had come. From the depths of humiliation to the heights of success, her journey was proof that, even in the darkest moments, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow.